Welcome to this IUN Community Garden Session, Collecting and Cleaning Seeds from the Garden. I'm Leslie Kaiser, CURE's moderator for this session. The presenter for today's session is Dolly Foster. Dolly, landscape horticulturist, has been a master gardener for 22 years, an Indiana accredited horticulturist for 20, and a certified arborist since 2008. For the past 22 years, Dolly has been presenting lectures on many garden topics. She spent a few years as an adjunct faculty member in the Joliet Junior College Agriculture Horticulture Department and 18 years in the parks and recreation industry as staff horticulturist for 2 park districts. She also managed the Oak Lawn Community Garden. Dolly has been butterfly gardening from the very beginning of her gardening career. Her passion has led to raising monarchs and swallowtail butterflies, which she has done for the past 15 years. Her garden at home has been a monarch way station since 2011. Welcome, Dolly.
Thank you very much, Amanda and Leslie. Really excited to be here today. This is one of my favorite topics. So we're going to talk about collecting and cleaning seeds today. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I love collecting seeds. And for a long time, I collected seeds and I never started any seeds, which is kind of an ironic thing. But I used to collect seeds just to give them away. And I didn't really ever start plants from those seeds until a few years ago when I started winter sowing, which is another lecture that we've already done and is up on YouTube. You can check into that. And I'll touch on that at the end. We're going to talk about collecting seeds. There's kind of 5 steps that I've broken it down into to make it a little simpler. And I'll touch on vegetable seeds a little bit later on when we get to cleaning seeds. Vegetables are pretty easy to collect, so I'll go over a few hints with that. But one of the things I wanted to talk about today is, why do we collect seeds? Besides the obvious thing where we are collecting seeds of vegetables because we need the vegetables for next year, we collect flower seeds because we need the flowers for next year for pollinators. And that's especially important right now as our plight with the pollinators is becoming more and more evident. And I just wanted to really, I want you to focus in on this photo on this slide, because I want you to see the diversity in seeds. So when we start collecting seeds and why we collect seeds, there's a lot of different reasons. Historically, seeds, of course, were collected for food and used year after year for food. And then seeds were also used as beads. And then I just wanted to show this to you. This is an apricot pit that my grandfather carved years and years ago, decades ago, and my mother put it on a chain. So seeds have been used to decorate ourselves for thousands of years. And for me, seed collecting is a really fun hobby. I absolutely love it. It is potentially addicting, just like I have here on the slide. I love trading seeds with other gardeners. I was participating in a seed exchange over the winter, and I think I exchanged with about 50 people. I was overrun with seeds. It's an inexpensive way to get more plants. Starting seeds is a really cheap way to grow new plants. You just have to be a little patient because plants take a little while to mature. This preserves diversity. So every year that you are collecting either flower or vegetable seed, you are allowing it to open pollinate, and I'll explain that in a minute. They are making your plants for the next year more resilient to problems in the environment, more adapted to your environment and your climate, and a little bit more disease and insect resistant every year that it grows in your garden and adapts to your garden. This is separating seeds from the chaff reduces disease, so that's why you're going to want to clean your seeds after you collect. And then again, this connects you with history, it connects you with other cultures. It's an interesting way to learn about the world, learning about how seeds have moved around the world during history. And this picture is a pretty cool picture. I just stumbled on it. It's an Alme. This is a really beautiful collage of seeds of perennials and annuals and a few edible seeds in here. And I just want you to be familiar with the fact that seed heads and seeds themselves come in a huge array of colors, shapes, sizes, textures. So not every seed is going to be a tiny little black ball if those are the only seeds you've ever seen in your life. If you're vegetable gardeners, I know that you haven't. But if you're new to gardening, new to seeds, some seeds are white, and then some seeds we will get around to saying, oh, if the seed is white, then it's not mature. So there's a lot of gray area and a lot of tricks to learn with this. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk a little bit about hybrid plants. Hybrid plants, we don't always want to save seeds from them. On edibles, the seed packages and annuals, the seed packages will have a clear F1 hybrid notation on the seed packages and on the seed tags if you're buying transplants. They don't always produce the same fruit. If it's a cucumber and it's an F1 hybrid cucumber, it's been developed and grown to specifically probably be disease resistant. And then if you have other cucumbers in the same space, they are cross-pollinating. The seeds from the cucumbers from this year are not going to be the same fruit next year because of the cross-pollination. There's pollen coming from one variety to another variety, getting mixed up in the flowers, and they won't produce the same. The same is not always true for F1 hybrid flowers. They don't always have the F1 hybrid notation on the seed packages, but this is probably true for 80 to 90% of our annual plants out there. Most of them are F1 hybrids, especially zinnias. Zinnias are pretty, I think it's a pretty good safe assumption that if a zinnia packet doesn't say heirloom or open pollinated, it will say, it will be an F1 hybrid. So hybrids are also noted in certain places, but not always on seed packages, with a single quotation marks around the side of the name of the plant. And that way you know that it's a variety or a hybrid. For seed purposes, choose open pollinated, heritage or heirloom seeds. You want to pick native straight species and sometimes nativars. So let me just go over those. Open pollinated means that the plant in question, let's say it's, let's just say it's an old-fashioned tomato plant like Cherokee Purple. It's a pretty common one. Cherokee Purple is a pretty stable tomato, and you can collect the seeds from that tomato. But if I go to the grocery store and I get an F1 hybrid tomato off of the stands there and bring it home and try and save those seeds, the seeds are not going to be exactly the same, or the fruit rather is not going to be exactly the same the next year. So open pollinated just means that that plant can either pollinate itself, or the bees can pollinate from another tomato and not influence the seeds for the next year. And this is the same for flowers too. Heritage flowers, heirloom flowers, things like that. They're all open pollinated. Heritage and heirloom are notations that we put onto plants to note that these particular varieties have been around for a very, very long time, most likely more than 50 years and even longer. And then native or straight species is what we are going to call those plants that we typically think of. The first thing that comes to most people's minds when they're talking about natives and straight species is they think prairie plants. So that's kind of the first thing. But then there's woodies. There are plants that grow in the forest, the understory, that are natives. And those plants can all be grown from seed from generation to generation. And they're very stable. They come back the same. Now, every once in a while, a plant breeder will put out 10,000 or 20,000 plants of something like an echinacea, like a purple coneflower. And out of those 10,000 plants, you might get one that has some kind of really unique, beautiful anomaly to the flower or to the plant itself, or the habit of how it grows, or how well it tolerates like clay soil or sandy soil. Those attributes are very important. Those plants will get named with single quotes around the variety name, and then they are then considered a nativar. All right. If you have any questions about these 4 things, make a notation in the chat right now so you don't forget. So the importance of pollinators. Pollination is vitally important for vegetable and fruit production. So if we don't have pollinators, those plants that need them will produce no fruit, and squash are notorious for this. And then if we didn't have good pollination, we also would not have flowers out in nature. So pollination is just as important for flowers as it is for vegetables. In fact, it's probably 50-50, because there are some vegetables that will self-pollinate. There aren't very many flowers that self-pollinate those. So, but without pollination, we would have no food. Without pollination, whether it be self-pollinating or not, we wouldn't have food and flowers. So pollinator health depends on the quantity and the quality of your plants provided. So this means if you do have a vegetable garden at home and your goal is to really get that garden to put out some big amounts of vegetables, then you need to bring in some of the plants that are good for pollinators, that are good for small pollinators, that are specifically good for the small parasitic wasps that will fight other bad species of bugs that we don't want in the garden. So you have to look for those high quality things like lemon gem marigolds are really good, alyssum and zinnias and French marigolds, because they're kind of an open flower. They don't have too many petals. Pollinators can get to them very easily. And then plant for a healthy percentage of native plants in your flower gardens. So native plants, I'm not going to say should or have to, but a good percentage of distribution of native and non-native is 60-40 for the natives. So 60% natives, 40% for the non-natives. It's about what I have here in my garden at home. And I have really good success with bees of all kinds of sizes and colors and shapes. I have lots and lots of bee species. And I've seen quite a few butterflies this year. I've been very, very pleased with this year when it comes to the pollinators. And then the bottom line, you can encourage native bees by using nest boxes. You can buy one or make one. Nest boxes are pretty cool. If you buy one and it happens to be unpainted, like the outside frame is unpainted, make sure you paint it, because otherwise that wood will warp. And then the bottom line with this about pollinators is use no pesticides in your garden. Just absolutely abandon that idea at all costs, because the minute that you put anything in your garden, you are going to hurt one pollinator or another pollinator, and it will cause a chain reaction in the natural ecosystem in your garden, and it may upset things and you may lose certain species. So just put it out of your mind. Start researching, attracting beneficial predators to your garden. There's lots of plants that will attract beneficial predators, and I did mention a couple of those already. Okay, so the 5 steps. The first step is observation. There is nothing worse than going out in the garden and thinking and taking a paper bag with you and saying, I'm going to go get those seeds. I'm sure they're ready by now. And they're gone. They've left. You missed it by a week. So observation and really getting to know your plants and really getting to know what it looks like at every stage is very important. Plant species generally bloom at the same time every year. And because of this, you can reliably predict when you're going to collect seeds. Perennials bloom for shorter periods of time. And so because of that, you could, if you have a good mixture of plants in your garden, meaning early spring, mid-spring, summer, early summer, midsummer, late summer bloomers, you could be collecting seeds from June all the way through to November, on and off. A mixture of species is going to make for a really good garden. It's going to make for a really excellent pollinator garden. And I think, by no means is my garden chocked full of flowers 100% of the time. the flowers in my garden kind of go through in waves. There's a lot of flowers at one time, and then there's a dirge, and then there's some flowers, and then there's a lot of flowers at the end of the season. So a perennial garden is going to kind of go up and down with its blooming. But a good mixture of those plants that do attract pollinators is going to make for a good all-season buffet, lack of a better word. Flowers on the same plant are going to bloom sequentially, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that in a minute. And then flowers will either bloom either top to bottom or bottom to top. And whether your flowers go up the stem opening or down the stem opening is really important to know, because that is going to dictate how you are going to collect your seeds. So for this plant, this is Cosmos sulphureus, and my favorite variety of Cosmos sulphureus is Diablo because it's really large. If you're looking for a pretty big annual to fill in a good space, you'll want this guy or Tithonia because they grow really fast and they're really big. So if we look at this really beautiful diagram that this photographer did, they put down stems of the different stages. So we have the flower bud at the first. You can see the first one, the flower bud is very, very tight. It hasn't even completely finished forming yet. There's the calyx on the bottom. The green little bits on the bottom are the calyx. And then the flower when it's open. And then after the pollinators come to this plant, and pollinators really, really do love this plant. After the pollinators come and they have done their job, then the petals on the flower will completely wilt. So you'll know that it's been pollinated. If that doesn't happen, then it hasn't been pollinated. And then the immature seed head is going to look a little naked, and it'll have some proto seeds coming up through the top. You see that little spike coming through the top of the immature seed head. And then when it's completely ready to collect, everything will open up. Everything that was surrounding the seeds will open up, and then the seeds are black. It's a spike, and all you have to do is grab them and throw them into a little paper bag. So if you didn't know or understand the sequence of events in a flower, you might think that the immature seed head, even though it has only one seed poking out the top, if you didn't know any better, you might take that and then dry that immature seed head. And then when you go to open it, you're going to find one seed and it's not even going to be developed. So it is really important to understand the sequence of events. Okay, we're going to just talk about a few specific flowers here pretty quickly. So this is Echinacea purpurea. This is purple coneflower, a pretty common flower in most people's gardens. This is a plant in the Asteraceae family. So it's everything that is a daisy. It's the largest plant family in the world. And one of the interesting notations about this plant is that this is a conglomeration of hundreds of individual flowers. And you can see that because you can see the ring with the yellow. Those are the anthers. Those are the pollen sacs that are sticking out. That means that that ring of flowers, that set, is blooming today. In a day or two, another ring will appear closer to the center of the flower. That's that day's flowers that are going to be open. And then as they get pollinated, the seeds are developed and mature from the outside to the inside of that flower. So if you look down at the diagram, you can see the petals kind of flying off to the side of this diagram. And the petals are a flower. And those are going to be the first flowers that get pollinated. And then that is where the first seeds are going to grow. And this is the same for sunflowers and all other composite plants, all other composite flowers. Okay, this is Echinopsis retro. This is globe thistle. And this is an interesting plant. It's very, very popular with bees if you want to attract bumblebees and a lot of other bees in the garden. This is a wonderful plant. And it's a bee color, blue, white, pale pink. Those are generally bee flower colors. They just seem to be attracted to that color flower. In the back and down here on the bottom, you're going to see the seed heads that have not opened yet. On the left-hand side of this photo, you will see a flower head that is halfway done blooming. And then because they bloom from the top to the bottom on these globes, the one in the very center is completely open, completely blooming. And then the one on the right side is a flower head that has finished blooming. The petals are wilting, and that seed head is ready to cover up with a little blossom bag to keep the birds from eating the seeds. So knowing the sequence is important. Another one here, Liatris spicata, this is Blazing Star. One of the things about Blazing Star, they bloom from the top to the bottom. Another thing about Blazing Star is that if you want to collect the seeds for this plant, you have to wait as long as humanly possible into October, late October and November to collect these seeds. They take a long time to really ripen. And you can see some of the white seeds in here. Those white seeds are ones that did not get pollinated. And then the black seeds towards the center and the bottom of the photo going to the left, those are all seeds that are going to be viable because they're mature. They are the mature and ripened color of that seed. They should be black or dark gray. Now, when you get ready to decide that you're going to start collecting seeds for big things like zinnias and Mexican sunflower and cone flowers and things like that, you're going to find the stem that has the biggest, boldest, most beautiful flower, the healthiest flower on the healthiest plant. Mark them with a string or a ribbon or something or some baker's twine, and then don't deadhead that flower. You need it to completely develop on the stem in order for the plants, in order for the seeds to ripen. And then knowing when seeds are ready. This is a really important thing. Like I mentioned before, seeds need to be collected at the right time to be viable. Learning the cues is going to take practice. And it took me a long time to learn. I've been collecting seeds for probably, I think over 10 years, about 10 years probably. And learning those cues does take practice. And then seeds are ripe when they turn brown from green or white. This is for most species, but not all. And I'll show you that in a minute. And your plant is going to tell you when the seeds are ready. There are cues that the plant is going to show you. For example, if you have milkweed in your garden for monarch butterflies, that cue that the seeds are ripe is that the seed pods open and the fluff starts to fly out carrying the seeds, and that goes flying around the yard. It's best to leave seed pods on as long as humanly possible until they're about ready to burst. There are some seed heads that you're never going to be able to catch it, but most of them you can. And if that's the case, then use a flower sleeve or a blossom bag or a little organza bag. And I'll show you that in a sec. So aster family flowers, this is zinnias and cone flowers and things like that. They're ready when the seed head begins to shatter. So you can touch that zinnia head and the flower starts to break away. Now this is, of course, if you can beat the yellow finches to your flowers, because the finches will eat the seeds. I've missed a few this year because of that. So again, a blossom bag is good. As soon as you start seeing the petals dry, that means the seeds are forming and ripening, and you can put a little bag over the top and the birds won't go near it. So this is what I mean by putting a little bag over the seed heads. This is a milkweed plant. It's an annual milkweed called tropical milkweed. Don't come at me. I love this plant. My monarchs love this plant. And I collect the seeds from it every year so that they don't escape into the neighborhood. For my common milkweed, I'll simply put a rubber band around the pods to keep them from bursting open. And then when, I'll leave one or two just left alone, no rubber band. When I see that one burst, I'll know that I can go collect the others. You don't collect common milkweed seed pods until mid to late September. So here's a seed pod that is burst open, and you can see the seeds are attached to the floss or the fluff. We usually call it floss though in horticulture, and that floss is going to carry those seeds. But for milkweed seeds, you can open that pod right now. If you guys have milkweed in your garden and you have lots of seed pods, go do this weekend. Go open a pod right now. The seeds are white. And if the seeds are white, they're not ready. So you have to wait until they're this dark chocolate brown. Okay. All right. This is Asclepias tuberosa. This is butterfly weed. And the way that you know these are ready is when they turn from green, the spring green color that is in here in the photo on the left, and they start to turn kind of a tawny color, kind of a reddish, purplish, or tannish color. Then they're about to burst. Milkweed again. You're going to wait until those seed pods, again, they look like they're kind of drying out. They're kind of a tawny color and they're ready to burst. It usually is within a day or so if that happens. For hollyhocks, you want to leave the seeds on the stem until the seed pods are papery and they're very dry. And you don't have to wait to this point where they burst open. You can collect them before they burst open. But I caution you, wear gloves when you're handling this plant. And when you take those seed pods off and put them into a paper bag, you are definitely going to have hollyhock weevils in there. And they can't hurt the seeds that have not already been affected. But if you do have hollyhock weevil, then the seeds that are affected are going to have a hole in it. That's where the little bugs came out. The weevils will lay their eggs in the seed pods of this plant in the summertime. So unless you are going to treat this plant, you just have to put up with it that you're going to lose a fair amount of your seed to the weevil. But there's always going to be some seed that's viable on a hollyhock plant. It might not just be 100%. It might only be, 40. Allium cernuum. This is a nodding wild onion. This is a native. It's a really beautiful native plant, native onion. I just love it. It's the flower heads. This photo doesn't even do it justice. They're just a really beautiful plant when they're getting ready to bloom. The flower heads are kind of nodding over and they're very stiff, straight stems. And then their seeds are super easy to gather. The bees love these plants. Bees love allium in general. You can see the seeds on the left-hand side in the photo. They're the little black dots inside the papery covering. And all you have to do is clip these off, throw them into a paper bag. You're going to let them dry and then shake them out. And it's that simple for a lot of seeds. These, if you don't recognize them, these are snapdragons. And this is a snapdragon stem flipped upside down. And when you flip them upside down, they look like little medieval skulls. It's really freaky. But I add this in here because what you're going to do when you cut your snapdragon seeds, you want to put them into the paper bag that you're going to use to dry them upside down. And so that's how you can remember to do that, because you want to be able to see the little skulls. This is Australis, Baptisia australis. This is false blue indigo. There's a picture in the inset there. It's a really beautiful, beautiful native plant. And when the seed pods turn black on your plant, that's when the seeds are ready. And it usually sounds like a baby rattle because the seeds will release themselves inside the seed pod. So if you shake the stem a little bit, they're going to rattle like a baby rattle, or a rattlesnake rattle, I guess. And you can collect them at that time. And all you have to do is let them dry for 2 weeks and pop them open and they're ready to go. This is columbine. Columbine is usually the first seed that I collect every year. I wonder if it was the first one this year. I think wild geranium was probably the first one I collected this year. So the earlier your plants bloom in the summer, or in the spring rather, the earlier in the summer you are going to collect those seeds because they are going to be the first ones to develop. So this is a photo of my pink columbine down here. And it's called Granny's Bonnets. And when the seed pods are getting near to be ready, they get very swollen, but they're still green and they have a little dry tip at the top. And then sometimes the seeds are all ready to go when they're still green and they're starting to dry out, but it's better for columbine for you to wait until they completely dry out and they're brown. But as you can see here, this is a photo that I took this year. This is a green pod, but it was paper dry, but for some reason didn't turn brown. And when I crushed it and broke it open, the seeds inside were ready to go. They were ripe. So here's one of those confounding seeds that, boy, did I have to learn. It took me a little while to learn this one. Echinacea purpurea, because I never bought any seed packages, when I started collecting seeds from the plants that I bought, I didn't really know that the seeds were white. And I got seed packages from a seed exchange one time, and the seed exchange envelopes had the dark brown spikes that are on this flower that protect the seeds. And that's all that was in the envelope. The seeds are white. The seeds are what is on the paper, and not the spikes that protect the seeds. So that gardener also did not know what to do either. And it took me a long time to learn. So don't feel embarrassed if you don't know, or you've collected something and you're like, oh, these seeds aren't germinating. Maybe you just collected the wrong part of the plant. It's possible. But this is one of those examples where the seeds go from white to white. They do not turn brown. So they kind of stay a grayish white color. Let's see. We went through that one already. Eupatorium is really easy. This is Joe Pye weed. When your seeds are ready to go, when they're ready to be collected, they are just fluffy. And if you are growing Joe Pye weed, I would caution you. Make sure you deadhead or collect all those seeds every year. Don't just let them fly. This is a very popular vine to grow in old-fashioned gardens, cottage gardens, hyacinth bean vine, Dolichos lablob. This is such a beautiful seed pod that this is the reason why everyone grows this plant. Despite the fact that the flower is really beautiful too. It's like a purple spike of flowers. They stick straight up from the plant, and hummingbirds like them. So the secret to this plant is to let the seed pods dry on the plant. Do not take them off when they're purple because they will get moldy. This is Helianthus annuus. This is sunflower, and almost every sunflower looks the same as this one. And just like our diagram that we saw at the beginning, you can see that the seeds are all separate. They're all single seeds all over the base of this plant, okay, the plate. And you can see that each one of these represents a single flower. And when you go to clean these plants off, all you do is let them dry for a significant amount of time, preferably in the house. If you do in the garage and you have a mouse, they will eat it all. But put these guys in the house, let them dry. Hanging them upside down works really well because then nobody can touch them. And then you just simply use your thumb wear gloves, use your thumb, and you just break them off. It's pretty easy. This is Vernonia fasciculata, tall ironweed. Tall ironweed is kind of a newish plant to me as far as the natives go, but I am really pleased that I found this beautiful, beautiful native plant. It's blooming right now in my garden, and I was really happy when I had to take a quick ride up to Michigan the other day that there was a lot of it on the side of the road. Now, what is also blooming right now is purple loosestrife. And so unless you really recognize ironweed, you might not know that it's different from the purple loosestrife, except that the flower heads are flat instead of spikes. But it's got a beautiful purple color, and this photograph doesn't even do it justice. But these guys are ready to go. They're ready to collect when the seeds have turned kind of fluffy. So they're a little similar to the milkweed in that they have a little bit of fluff on the end of their seed, and then you can just pull them off of the little seed head and you just put them in a paper bag to dry. So poppies, people have been collecting poppy seeds for eons, and other things from poppy too, but we just collect seeds. Most important thing about poppy seeds is that you let them dry on the stem as long as possible until you see them open up. If you look at the picture on the far right side, the picture where the seed heads are all brown and dry, you can see that the center of the flower has lifted up and opened up the seed chamber. So you can see kind of like a little window in there down on the left. If you look in the center photograph, you can see the center of the flower is still attached to that big bulbous seed head. So when that center of the flower dries and pops up, the seeds are ready to go. And this one will also sound sort of like a baby rattle because you'll be able to hear the seeds inside. This is a really fun plant. This is Ruellia humilis. This is wild petunia, and it's a beautiful, beautiful native plant. I love it very much. It's blooming right now in my garden, and they have a unique seed pod. So you don't collect the seed pods until a little bit later in September when they're kind of drying out on the stem. This is what it looks like in the photograph on the right. And one year I collected a whole bunch of this from one plant that I had at work, and I put all the stems. The stems were all about yay big, you know, like maybe 1.5 feet long. I put them into a paper bag to dry in my office, and it was really humorous during seed time. I thought it was fun. I loved it. I don't think my bosses liked it very much, that the floor of my office would be just completely covered end to end with paper bags full of seeds. So this one in particular, when the seed heads dry out a little bit, the force inside the seed when it dries explodes the seed head, and then the seeds are propelled out. There's a lot of plants that do this. It's sometimes called exploding ovaries, which we don't wish on any mammals, but for plants they can do it. So my secretary in our department called me one day. I was out in the field. I was, doing something landscape related, and she called me up and she said, "Hey, it sounds like there's a teeny tiny gun going off in your office." And I said, "What?" And so I came back to the office at the end of the day, and she's like, "Yeah, it's been going on all day." Well, what was happening was these guys had been in this paper bag for about, I don't know, probably a week. And they started to open up, and they were just shooting all over my office, and she could hear them ricocheting off the walls. So we had to staple the bag closed. And from then on, whenever I collected this plant, once Debbie started hearing the little seed heads pop open and the seeds ricocheting around the office, she would just pop in there and she would close the seed bag up with a stapler for me. So that's a really simple one to collect. New England aster is such an essential plant for a monarch garden. I can't say too much about it. It's just a really lovely flower, and it's so popular at the end of the season with bumblebees and honeybees and other native bees, and then monarchs will feed on this plant during the migration. And what you need to do is be very patient with New England aster, and you will not collect the seeds until well into October. You won't be able to collect 100% of the seeds from this plant because they bloom sequentially, just like I was talking about before, kind of from top to bottom. And so the seeds on the top will be ready before the seeds at the bottom. And so if you miss it, you're going to miss all the ones at the top, and you'll be collecting the ones from the bottom. So it's a little hard to explain until you really grow the plant and you see how it blooms. But in any case, just like our ironweed, you want to wait until that seed head has that fluffy little ball on it, and then you can just pinch those seeds out and throw it into a paper bag, or cut the stem off, throw it into a paper bag, let them dry for a little while, and then clean them. The seeds on that plant are also going to be white. Mexican sunflower is another really beautiful, beautiful large annual. I wish that everyone had room in their garden to plant this plant because it is so popular with hummingbirds, bumblebees, and monarchs that I can never not have this plant in my garden. And I have many, many gardeners that I have mentored that have said the same thing, that they're never not going to have this plant in their garden because it's so beautiful. The flowers are so vibrant. That's one of the great things about it. But the wildlife that it feeds is incredible, the amount of pollinators that it feeds. So the secret to getting this plant's seeds is to wait until the seed head is not just dry, but when the seed stem starts to flatten, and then it starts to bend over. At that point, you can cut back here. and just throw it into a big paper bag, because you're going to have a lot of them, because this is a really large plant. You're going to have a ton of seed from this plant. And the seeds are these little chevron shaped, you can see in the inset photo, there's a little chevron shape in between the spikes, just like on the coneflower, but that little chevron shape is the back end of the seed. Verbena hastata, another great plant, another beautiful plant for bees and butterflies. And its cousin, Verbena stricta, is hoary vervain. This is blue vervain. They're both really quality plants to have in a home garden, especially a native garden, because they feed all the really, really tiny bees. And I just found out this summer doing some research that Verbena stricta, the hoary vervain, is a host plant for buckeye butterflies, which I think is a really cool thing. Just another host plant to add to my garden. So I'm really excited about having them in my garden this year. So our next thing after observation is going to be collecting. Now I've kind of given you some hints about collecting, but here's kind of the tips. So don't collect as soon as the petals wilt or fall off. You have to wait a while until the seeds actually develop. Seeds are going to take anywhere from 2 to 8 weeks to develop and ripen, and then you have to dry, and then you have to clean them, and then you can store them. It sounds like a lot of steps, but once you get familiar with what you're doing, it's just going to be automatic. It's going to be like muscle memory. Seed pods should be plump and not flat. And that's pretty much, I can't think of any seed pod out there that's like flat. You should be able to either feel the seeds inside like in a bean pod, or it should be a nice big fat plump seed pod. Not flat, not flimsy. Your seeds should be hard at maturity. They should be the mature color, and you can always Google the name of the plant and the mature seed, and you'll find photos on the internet. And your seeds should be plump. They should be stiff for the most part. Like Tithonia seeds, I always say that they should sort of look like petrified wood. They should be kind of like a dark gray color, and they should be very, very hard. You should never be able to break that seed in half. But if the seed isn't fully developed, you can tear it in half really easy. Same as zinnias. Fleshy seed pods like milkweed should be dried on a table or an open tray for 3 to 4 weeks and let them pop open naturally. I usually just let mine dry in a paper bag, but you kind of have to, turn them around. You have to stir them up in that paper bag so they don't get moldy. So having a big tray or a big sifting frame that you're going to use for your compost, using something like that is the best thing for milkweed. One thing that I did do last year was that I used one of those little inexpensive mesh laundry hampers. And that was excellent for my milkweed seed because the air circulation was perfect. And that's the most important part about seed drying and seed collecting. Paper bags are preferred because of the good air circulation. It helps keep everything from getting moldy. Okay. Wait for your cues from nature. One of the cues from nature is with sunflowers. You can start collecting sunflower seeds from your plant or cut the whole seed head off. Once you start seeing birds poking at the seeds at the very top of the flower, they're going to get that top row. And then once that starts, you can take that seed head right off. So you got to do some observation. You have to watch your plant. Otherwise, the birds will show the squirrels that the seeds are ready, and then you get no seeds because the squirrels are voracious. A few more tips. Experience is going to teach you which seeds can be collected a little early. There are a few varieties of seeds on plants that you can ripen off the plant, but make sure you give those seeds a little while, a couple weeks to develop. One of those things is milkweed. You can go out. This pot is fleshy and green. It's not ready to open. It's not ready to burst on its own yet, but the seeds are brown. So they are mature and they are ripe. They just need to dry now. So that's one of the ones that you can collect a little early. And that's just going to mostly be an experience thing. That is not usually information that you're going to find anywhere about a plant. Be prepared when you go out to the garden. If that's your task for the day, take a couple paper bags out with you. You take pruners, take scissors, because there's some stems that cut better with pruners and scissors. Take a marker to mark the bag as soon as you fill it with the seed heads. It's so important to label everything on every stage of this journey of collecting seeds, cleaning them, storing them, starting seeds, growing seedlings, and putting your seed plants out. It's really important to keep labels with them at all times through that process so that you do not get confused and you don't do things like sell the wrong plant at the wrong name like I did this year. I had like 4 flats of one plant that I thought was something. It was something else. It's a little embarrassing. And take gloves with you, because if you're going to collect Tithonia seeds, you're going to get stuck. They are very pointy. All right, the importance of paper bags. Number one, it's the air circulation. And don't fill your bags to the top with really fleshy pods like milkweed. They need air circulation, so fill them only halfway or 1/3 and allow all seeds in your paper bags to dry from a minimum of 2 weeks to a maximum of a few months. And then you can clean them at will. That's usually my task all winter, is to clean my seeds while I'm watching TV or whatever. Don't take all the seeds in one area. This is especially important if you have permission to collect native seeds from someone's property. I'm going to just urge you never to collect seeds from forest preserves, state parks, county parks, or national parks, because in some states that's a felony, especially if it's an endangered plant. So if there is something that you really love, it's beautiful, you covet it, you want it in your garden, and it's out in nature, do not go back and collect those seeds. Just leave them for nature. You can find that plant on somebody's private property, buy the seeds, buy the plants, and then collect your own seeds. And then if you do have private property permission to go collect seeds, don't take all the seeds in one area. Take less than 10%, because seeds have to fall to renew that colony of plants periodically. And if the seeds aren't there to do that, then that seed could disappear from that area. And then another consideration is animals and insects need seeds for food in the winter. So you do want to make sure that some of those seeds do fall. Don't get greedy, leave some for nature. It's a lesson that I had to learn in my own garden. I almost lost that pink columbine I showed you a photo of earlier. I got so far down because I was collecting all the seed all the time. I got so far down that I only had 1 or 2 plants. And that was a little scary because it's a really hard variety to kind of find the exact variety. You can't just buy the seeds for that variety anymore. So cutting seed heads, do yourself a favor. Remember these tips. Look closely before you cut. Your seeds should be ripe before you cut. If not, just wait. Split open a pod to check, just like on the milkweed. You can split open a pod and check, or on a columbine, you can break off one of those little tips and look down. Are the seeds black? Typically, the first ripe seed head is going to be the first flower that opened. So on milkweed, the lowest seed pod in this photograph, you can see was the first pod that opened, because it's gray, it's brown, the seeds are almost all gone. And then the seed pods up here at the top of the plant, they have not completely opened yet. They've not completely dried out. And those were the flowers that bloomed after the low flowers. So this is why I say that knowing the sequence of flowering on a stem is really important. Do the flowers go up or down? And which ones are going to open first? Which seed pod is going to be ready first? Because like I said, not every seed pod on every plant is going to be ready at the exact same time. And then cut your seed heads off. Do not tear them. If you tear them, you get a snapback effect. If I just went up to this milkweed plant and just tore off one of these milkweed pods and pulled the plant towards myself, as soon as that seed head would release, the plant will snap back and throw all the seeds in the opposite direction, which is exactly what I don't want to happen. So always cut. So this is especially true for Agastache. Agastache is notorious for snapping back, and you lose half of your seeds because they snap back. So usually I will point the seed head into the paper bags, and I collect paper bags from everywhere that I can possibly collect paper bags from. And then I just direct that seed head into the paper bag, cut while it is going down into the bag, and then I don't lose any seed. Okay, drying. Drying is super simple. Just put your plants in a bag and label the bag, and then just let them sit. So it's pretty simple. Your stems should be upside down so that any dried seed will fall by itself. 2 to 4 weeks is a pretty good amount of time, but longer is better for some seeds. Drying can be done in bowls or trays. I want to tell you that when I first started out collecting my own seed, I collected my seed into those little African violet cups that you get when you buy a violet. And then I moved up to like a little bit bigger bowl, and then a little bit bigger bowl. And then I started using the small paper bags like in this photo. Well, when I was at the height of collecting seeds for work that I would distribute to other organizations and people, I was using grocery bags, and I was collecting grocery bags full of each of my native seeds that I collected. So by no means do you have to do that, but collecting small paper bags, or go to GFS and just buy a package of small paper bags that are around the same size as these little handle bags, that will be great. That will be great for you, because as a home gardener, you probably don't need a ton of seeds. So cleaning, some plants have really specific cleaning procedure, but the big question here is, why are we going to clean seeds? Why do I bother? Why don't I just break off a snapdragon pod and throw that little medieval skull into a little paper envelope and just smash it down and give it to someone? There's a couple of reasons why we want to clean seeds. First of all, we want to separate the seed from the chaff. Just like that echinacea example I gave you, the person who filled those seeds for that seed exchange gave me the chaff instead of giving me the seed. So it's important to know the difference between the seed and the chaff, and you want to separate the two. And chaff's the plant material that protects the seed. It wears down through the weather of the winter, and then it allows the seed to germinate in spring. Clean it so you're planting clean seed and not the chaff, because the chaff could have a leaf disease, a fungal disease on it. So you don't want that near your seeds when you are starting seeds. And then when sharing seeds, cleaning seeds, getting the chaff off, and getting them looking really, really good, like a seed package that you're going to buy, is proper etiquette to share seeds. Don't just share seeds in a loosey-goosey way. This is kind of the base of gardening etiquette. But it's the most satisfying, rewarding part of the cycle of the garden seed collection is cleaning those seeds, and it can be kind of fun with some of them. So most seeds can be shaken loose after about 2 weeks in the paper bags. You can shake the seed heads, and the seeds will come right out of the seed heads. This is true for a lot of things like foxglove and rose campion. I just finished cleaning both of those. You just simply hold the paper bag closed, and you're just going to shake. That's it. Or you can stick your arm in if it's a big enough bag, and you can just shake the stems. Clean the seeds out from the bottom of the bag periodically. Make sure that your paper bags don't have any holes in the seams in the bottom. For some very, very tiny seeds like columbine, I have one specific type of paper bag that I actually bought a package of, and those guys don't have a good seal. So I always have to tape the bottom or put 2 bags together just to make sure that while I'm shaking, the seeds don't go through the bag and get lost. Empty those seeds into a bowl and shake until there's no more seeds coming out of those seed stems, and get the rest of them into a bowl. And then you can clean them up a little bit, pick out the little bits of plant material, and then you can store them. So there's a few special cleaning needs for some plants. So the plants down here on the bottom are Eryngium yuccifolium, that's rattlesnake master. Those are the 2 pictures on the left. Echinacea purpurea is the 3rd picture. Echinops erythro, I already showed you, those were those blue balls. And then Tithonia rotundifolium, this is Mexican sunflower. This is the photo on the far right. One thing that all 4 of these plants have in common is that there are structures on the plant that are very spiky. They feel like a needle. And so when you go to clean these seed heads, definitely wear gloves, because there is nothing worse than getting, 5 dozen holes in the tip of your thumb and your thumb going numb for days because you have not worn gloves. So for the echinacea, or for the echinops, the globe thistle, wear gloves, split those seed heads apart. Those blue balls, they come apart. You just give them a twist after they've dried for a little while. You just let it all fall into a bowl, and then you squeeze the seed out of the chaff. So this one is a little bit time consuming, and you should wear a pair of latex gloves, because these things are in the Asteraceae family, but it's also the thistle family, and they hurt. They make you very itchy. It doesn't mean that you should never plant this plant, because this is just a beautiful plant. It's a beautiful pollinator plant. Cleaning milkweed seed pods, pretty easy. You let them dry for a couple of weeks. You grasp the middle part out of the seed pod, and then you just use your fingers to pull those seeds free into a paper bag. And then you can save the fluff in a bucket for the springtime, put it out in the springtime, like in April, when the finches and the swallows and sparrows are nesting, and that fluff is good nesting material. For Rudbeckia, this is a really hard seed head just to shake apart. They're almost like they're glued together. So this little wooden apparatus is a good one. Just use a little bit of scrap wood, screw them together, and then just press them down over a mesh sieve. This looks like a 1/4 inch mesh sieve. And the seeds fall to the bottom and the flowers are on the top. Penstemon digitalis. This is a hard seed to collect. It really is. The reason being is that the seed pods are almost like wood. They are very, very thick. There's nothing papery about these guys. And I had to buy a granite mortar and pestle in order to break these guys apart, but it does work really well. It seems like they have to go through winter outside, like the whole winter, and then in the spring they'll burst open. So if you want to collect the seed in fall, they're ripe, they're ready to go. However, they need that little push from the mortar and pestle. You can try and pry these things apart with 2 thumbs, which I have done for many years before I bought my mortar and pestle. And the problem with that is that there is a little sharp spike on the tip of that seed head or the seed pod, and that will cut underneath your thumbnail, and it hurts. Plants have great defenses. They really do have great defenses. Okay, separating seeds, you're going to want to, if you're going to really, really get into this, you're going to do what I did. You hit up every secondhand store, Bed Bath & Beyond, and on the internet, and you buy all these different kinds of sizes of sieves. I have scientific sieves that soil scientists use. And the reason why I do this is because I clean about 60 different types of seed every year, and each seed has a different sieve that could be used with it. And the reason why we use a sieve is because we want to separate the seed and the chaff, or the seed from the chaff. So, and sometimes, let me go back here. Sometimes the seeds will go through the sieve and you will have the chaff in the bowl of the sieve. And sometimes the chaff will go through the sieve and the seeds will be in the bowl of the sieve. Depends on how big the seeds are. With zinnias, you kind of have to you have to separate the seed from the chaff on its own, on a towel or a piece of paper. The seeds on the right-hand side up here that are gray, those are the ripe seeds. The white stuff down here in the center of the photo, that is the chaff. It's white, it's papery, it's flimsy. The seeds up in the far right at the top of this towel, those are all seeds that formed but never ripened, so they're empty, so they feel papery. Separating seed from chaff by winnowing. Winnowing is a very, very ancient method of cleaning seeds. If you have seeds that are heavy enough that don't get blown by the wind, you can simply use 2 stainless steel bowls or whatever you want, And you pour the seed and the chaff from one bowl to another on a very light breezy day or in front of a small fan, and the chaff will blow away and the seeds will end up in the bowl. So determining seed viability, again, here's our zinnias. The ones within the red circle are the viable seeds, and you can see they have a healthy stem. They have a healthy rim around the outside. There's a furrow in the middle. They feel stiff, they feel plump, they feel almost woody. The seeds on the right side, or the left side, sorry. The seeds on the right side, I could cut those apart with my thumbnail because they're empty. There's no embryo inside. So growing vegetables for seed collection. I know a lot of you are here for this. So what do you do about collecting seeds from vegetables? There's not a lot of strange ways to do this. There's a couple straightforward ways to do it. Most importantly, you want to choose open pollinated varieties of vegetables. If you choose F1 varieties of vegetables, like we talked about before, hybrid vegetables, if you take the seeds from, like, say, a tomato or a pepper in the grocery store, you're going to get a tomato or a pepper next year from those seeds. However, they will not be the exact same pepper or tomato, especially if you have other varieties growing in your garden and they might cross-pollinate. A lot of vegetables don't cross-pollinate really readily, except for squash. So definitely you only want to grow one type of squash. If you are intending on collecting seeds from, say, spaghetti squash should be the only squash that you grow in your garden. You have to keep your pollen and your flowers isolated. So you can grow heirloom varieties and gather their seeds, avoid unwanted cross-pollination. So for cucumbers, this is important. For squash, this is important. Only grow one type of each. And then most other vegetables aren't going to cross-pollinate. So it's safe to grow green beans and drying beans in the same place. So there's two types of seed collecting in vegetables. There's dry seed collecting and wet seed collecting. So when choosing your fruit to be collected, you're going to choose one of the best from the plant, maybe one of the earliest vegetables, like for some pepper plants, like the earliest ones are the biggest and the most beautiful. Same for tomatoes. Let them ripen completely on the plant. For tomatoes, this is almost to the point of being soft. They should definitely be whatever their mature color is, because as we know, there's 1,000 different colors of tomatoes now. They're not all red. Tie a ribbon or a string or some kind of twine around the stem of that plant, of that vegetable, so you know that that is the one that you are going to collect seeds from. Now, being a home gardener, you probably don't need to collect any more seed other than from one piece of fruit, like a pepper or a tomato or a spaghetti squash or a watermelon. So you don't need to have tons and tons of fruit, sitting around your yard ripening and over ripening. Make sure you are constantly collecting from your garden. This keeps your garden vegetables, plants blooming and encouraging them to make more seed, more vegetables, more fruit. And to keep one fruit on there with a piece of twine around it, just to note that that's the one you're going to collect, that is not going to keep your plant from continuing to flower and fruit. So for most vegetables, you're going to do dry fruit collection. And so that means things like beans and peas, peppers, melons and squash, eggplant and okra. So what does this mean? This means you cut open the mature fruit on the beans. You're going to wait until the bean pods are completely dry. Peas, same thing. Peppers, you'll want to wait until the pepper starts to wrinkle and get a little soft on the plant. And then you can, melons and squash, make sure they're mature. Eggplant, make sure it's way mature, over mature, like orange, like yellow. And then okra, you can let them dry on the plant, just like peppers. For these other ones, melon, squash, pepper, you take the seeds out of the fruit and you put them onto either a coffee filter on a plate or on a piece of paper towel on a plate, and just let them dry for about a week, and then you can store them. And again, labeling your seeds like on the paper towel, or write the name on the coffee filter or whatever you're going to let them dry on is really, really important to keep it straight, you know, unless you are only growing one type of squash, like just spaghetti squash. Labeling is useful though, so you don't forget. So what's wet seed collecting? So these are seeds that are surrounded by gel, and that gel prevents them from germinating. So these are, so seeds from this plant have to ferment in order to basically get the gel off completely, and then you can store the seeds. So steps for seed fermentation is collect the tomatoes and the cucumbers, gather up the supplies that you need. You're going to need a jar, you're going to need your tomatoes, a little bit of water, a spoon, a knife. Cut your plant in half, or your tomato in half, or your cucumber, cut it down the center, and then start scooping the seeds and the gel out and put it into the jar. You can see them in the jar there. And then at the end of it, you're going to pour this little bit of water in here. I'm going to go back, and then I'm going to show you. This is the jar that I did yesterday. So you can see the seeds are in there. The seeds that are down at the bottom of the jar that are heavy, those are the good seeds. Now the fermentation process will take 3 to 5 days. And what's going to happen is that the water on the top of this thing is going to collect mold. And that's fine. That's the fermentation process. So you want to go in there and you want to just swish this around twice a day, just to keep the water moving in there a little bit. And then after about 5 days, you can just, you kind of skim out that mold and throw that away. And then the seeds that are left in there at the bottom, the heavy ones, those are the ones that are viable. And then you just wash those with a sieve, dry them on a coffee filter or paper towel for a week. Make sure you label it, and store it in an envelope or a little glass jar. So seed collecting for vegetables is pretty simple. However, there are some vegetables that we have to wait for the second year. Now, I think that vegetable seeds for plants in this category, cabbage, Swiss chard, kale, celery, carrots, beets, these are all inexpensive seeds to purchase. So this is not always something that people are going to actually wait around for the second year to gather, unless, you know, there's a specific reason why. But most of these do not flower until the second year. So you have to wait until the second year for them to gather the seed. And cabbage is a little complicated. Cabbage, you have to like take the plant up and you have to dig a trench and you have to bury the cabbage. And then you have to replant it the next spring. It's kind of a process. So I don't recommend trying to do cabbage, but the other ones you can just let them go, leave them over the winter, and then they'll flower next year. And then storing. It's our last step before we use our seeds. So a cool, dark spot is the best place to put all seeds in. Vegetable seeds can be kept viable a little bit longer if you put them in the refrigerator. And in the refrigerator, they should be in a glass jar. They should have a little silicone, a silica packet in with them to keep the humidity down. And you should never place seeds in the freezer. That's like long-term Svalbard type storage. That's not what we need for our flower seeds and for our vegetable seeds. You can place seeds in homemade envelopes. You can place seeds in store-bought envelopes. You can put those little envelopes into jars, and you can put them in the fridge or on a shelf or wherever. They should just be out of direct sunlight. Now, this looks all very neat and tidy on this, okay? But here's the reality. This is how my seeds get stored sometimes. I can hear the laughter. I do grow and collect like 60 different types of seeds. In fact, I've never even actually counted. But this is kind of how it ends up. But I do try and keep them out of the direct sun, even though I know there's some sun like beaming in on this photo I just noticed. But I do try and keep them out of the sun. But all my seed bottles are all recycled seed bottles. I don't buy seed bottles for my seeds. And I I just use masking tape to label them. That way I can, when the seeds run out, I can take the label off. I can either recycle the container or I can use it for another seed. So sharing seeds, how do you share seeds with people? Well, number one, clean your seeds, make them look very nice. And then you can either make your own seed packages. You can find templates online. There's thousands of them out there. You can purchase number one coin envelopes, which are the little envelopes in the back of this photo, the little brown ones. You can use tiny glass vials, little spice bottles. You can reuse junk mail envelopes. You can do a lot of different things. And then what are you going to do with all these seeds? That's what I mean. That's the problem I had for years and years. What am I going to do with all these seeds? Well, you can do a couple things. You can make seed bombs. You can sow them outdoors directly for flowers. You can winter sow them, which is what this photograph is. Winter sowing is sowing in the milk jugs. And there is a YouTube video on the IUN Community Garden YouTube page for this. You can share your seeds with friends. You can trade them with friends. You can trade them with other people in the community. Go to a seed exchange. For those of you who live in Northwest Indiana, we had a seed exchange at the Hobart Library. They're trying to start a seed library, and we're probably going to do another seed exchange coming up this January on Seed Exchange Day. There's like a National Seed Exchange Day. And so if this is something you might be interested in, collect some vegetable seeds, collect some flower seeds, and we'll do an exchange. So seed starting, there's a couple different methods of seed starting, and I'm only going over this very, very briefly. So 4 methods of seed starting are going to be direct sow, starting seeds indoors in your house, which is very tricky, using a small greenhouse, or winter sowing. If you're going to start your seeds in the house, a lot of native plants need to be cold stratified. And that's when you put your seeds in with a little bit of moist soil, potting soil, or sand. And then they need to be put into the refrigerator for a period of cold. And then you take them out and you can sow them into pots, and then they'll germinate. Winter sowing, you don't really have to do any of that. The stratification happens outdoors naturally. And it's very, very convenient way to start seeds. And it's been an absolute miracle to my seed starting. And then we get back to the front, to the beginning. And why do we collect seeds? We collect seeds because it's fun. I love it. I think it's great. I love sharing it. It's an inexpensive way to get more plants. That's really wonderful. It's really important nowadays. But I do encourage you to keep supporting your independent garden centers. They're very important to our communities. Don't leave them out in the cold. Buy your seeds from them at least to get you started. And then I guess the only other thing I want to say is get really good at observing your garden. And when you go out and you are really trying to observe things in your garden, whether you're looking for insects or you're getting ready to start collecting seeds or whatever it is, when you're just out there doing some observations, you're going to be amazed at the things that you see in your garden. And you're going to be surprised at the depth of the ecosystem in your garden is that you've never noticed before. So I think that sowing seeds, collecting seeds, raising caterpillars, looking for pollinators, these are all things that helped me really slow down, stop walking so fast through my garden, and really starting to observe the ecosystem in my garden. And I've been really pleasantly surprised at the pollinators I've seen, especially the variety of native bees that I've seen. I seem to collect, a new variety every couple of years, a new little tiny one, or a mason bee or something like that. But have fun out in the garden, and I hope that saving seeds is going to be a fun thing for you. So if you guys have any questions, we can do that now.
Dolly, it looks like early in the presentation, there was a question about a recommended website where you can actually see the seeds. And then somebody had recommended Prairie Moon Nursery. Do you know of any others?
For native plants, Prairie Moon is that's the gold standard for seeds. For other flower seeds, I don't know of just one website, but I do know that if you Google, so how I Google things, if I Google the name of a plant, because I'm looking for the seed, and I'm not really sure what this thing is supposed to look like, I'll go to the images page from that search on Google, and I will look at all those images. And nine times out of 10, whatever is the most popular form of that seed that I see in all those images is most likely the correct one. So it doesn't seem that reliable, but it works out pretty good.
Okay, there's another question. Where do you like to buy blossom bags?
I buy them from Amazon. You can get about 100 of them for about $12 or $15. And then I have a couple of different sizes. I have really small 2-inch by 3-inch ones, all the way up to 5 by 7. So I've got like 4 sizes, and I use them for different plants.
And do they have like a little drawstring, or how do you tie them on?
They do. They have a little drawstring.
Okay.
So these are basically, if you've ever been to a bridal or a baby shower, these are the little organza gift bags they usually give you some kind of treat in. So you may all have 1 or 2 of those in your panty drawer right now or whatever, you know, or in your dining room drawer. That's usually where my mom's ended up. So they're organza. They can get wet. They don't get ruined when they get wet. They have good air circulation, and they're easy to take on, take off. I've had some of mine for a few years. With the milkweed though, sometimes the sap gets in there and gets them sticky. But yeah, they're super easy to use. They have a drawstring, and you just need to pull that drawstring on these little bags. You do not need to tie them.
Okay, and then there was a new question that popped up. Do you have any specific tips for a public library, seed library?
I know that Crown Point has just started a seed library also. So Hobart is in the process of starting theirs up. Hopefully they're going to have it up by next year. And then I know that Crown Point started theirs about 2 years ago. And if you're in Illinois, Blue Island has one. I think they still have one. And those are the only 3 that I know of.
Okay, and
I'm sorry, Leslie, let me just explain what a seed library is really quickly. A seed library is usually a collection of seeds that is going to be at some kind of public organization. It doesn't always have to be at a library, but most of the time it is. And this collection of seeds is there for the public to come in. You choose your seeds. You can take a few seeds out from the main seed envelope of that variety, and then you sign your name that you are going to come back at the end of the season, and you are going to bring some of that seed back to the library. So this is definitely a thing where you need to, in order to take out, you have to be able to put back in later. So you really have to be very vigilant that you, and don't forget that you have to collect some seeds and bring some seeds back. Because if gardeners are not bringing seeds back to the seed library, then the seed library ends up running out of seeds, and it's all free. So that's why we have to have gardeners bring seeds back. And if you're interested in a lot of really old-fashioned seeds and you want to join a seed exchange club, Seed Savers Exchange has been around since the 70s, and it is the gold standard of seed heritage collection.
so if a library wanted to get started with this seed library, would they reach out to maybe a local Master Gardeners Club, or what would be the best advice if they just wanted to get it started?
I would say yes, they should reach out to their local extension to see what kind of resources they have that they might be able to find for them, and they might be able to get them seed donations to start the seed library up, and then just make sure you have a card catalog that will fit everything.
Okay, and then what is a good website for finding seed templates to give to someone else?
You just have to Google seed envelope template, and there's thousands of them. And I usually use scrap paper for it. So paper's getting used twice. There isn't just one out there, because people put them up on their blog sites, and you know, I think I made my own last time. I made my own template. So it's not hard. It's not hard, and they're easy to find. Alrighty.
So I want to thank everyone for showing up. Dolly, thank you so much for sharing this information.
You're welcome. Thank you everybody for coming. Since you didn't have that many questions, that must mean I did a good job.